talking the Reds. We're with NordVPN. It's Neil Atkinson with Mo Stewart to my left, Josh Sexton to my right. Pleased to have both of them with us. We are with NordVPN for these Talking Reds through the first part of this season. It's a pleasure to be with them. If you go to nordvpn.com/TAW, you can see an offer there, but more on that to come. Before we get stuck into that, on this, we're going to talk about, first and foremost, Liverpool against Brighton in the EFL Cup. Secondly, and Mo was with him yesterday, do we feel as though the Arne Slot point of view around how the squad's going to be used is perhaps changing a little bit before our very eyes as pressure comes on? Thirdly, how's everyone else going to deal with the League Cup? Brentford went through last night on penalties. I think it's a big deal for Brentford, but we'll talk about that as well. Then we might take a little bit of a break, and then we might move on and talk about the Manchester United situation and what we think of it. We get your comments in all the way through. Josh may use them, he may not, to be honest with you. He's a law unto himself.
Depends how good they are, really.
Yeah. So
no pressure.
None of you shite. We're not interested in that. Good comments only, no bad ones, to say the least. Mo, you were in the press conference yesterday.
I was.
There's this little bit of a shift, I think, where the manager, I think, in the early part of the season... No, in fact, I'll just go with a direct question. I think there's every chance Liverpool... We will look at the two teams and the two benches that are picked for the game against West Ham in the third round of the EFL Cup at Anfield, and the two teams and the two benches for the game against Brighton and Hove Albion away in the fourth round of the League Cup, closer to winning the League Cup. And I think that the team will be stronger and the bench will be stronger for the West Ham game than it will be for this one.
I do, and it's funny because there was a little bit of what people interpret by what he says. So when he says he can't do what he did against West Ham, most people assumed that meant, well, obviously that means that he's going to be going stronger because we haven't got as deep a squad, so it's going to have to be some of the first team. It's like, is that what he meant, or did he mean the opposite? Because you could also read it to mean the opposite. And I think it was instructive how many of the players he mentioned by name.
Yes.
So
list them.
Yeah. So Endo got a mention, Quansah got a mention, Gomez got a mention, Tyler Morton.
Big mention.
Got a big mention.
Wasn't prompted the Tyler Morton one.
No, exactly. And that was the one that really made my ears prick up. Obviously, he spoke about Yaros, and it was almost like he didn't want to say that he'd made his decision. In fact, he specifically said he had made his decision, but then he also said, well, Quave's played a lot of games. And it's just like, well, there you go. I think that's the decision made right there. So, yeah, I do expect this to be possibly the most experimental side of the Slot era so far. And I mean, we can talk about priorities within the cup competition. We talk about rhythm and momentum and all those things. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think where we are in this season is always the point where teams, particularly teams in Europe, have to kind of take a breath and be like, okay, where are we here? Because it's all coming a bit quick.
I'm struck by, genuinely, I think that the previous manager, I think, would not have let as many go in the summer. I want to circle back around onto that. But I also think the previous manager would not have Van Dijk or Salah travel. We saw that a couple of times with the previous manager, and I'm struck by this tonight. As to, I think against West Ham, Van Dijk, I think Salah comes on, remember rightly, for a period, and Van Dijk's on the bench.
Yeah.
I think there's a fighting chance that the same thing ends up applying here. I think there's a fighting chance Van Dijk and Salah don't travel.
Well, I'd like to see that. I mean, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because the difference between Pep Guardiola, who has obviously been in City for quite some time, he knows the players, he knows the league, he knows the rhythms of a season here in England, and he pretty much said, in the post-match of the Watford game, I'm not playing any of my first team. Like, I'm dragging kids out of the academy to play this game, and frankly, the academy is pretty good, so they can do that. But he was open about it, as open as you can get, and there were no column inches. There was no one kind of saying Pep Guardiola's disrespected the League Cup, because frankly, everybody disrespects the League Cup. So I think when you're on a slot and you're coming into a building, you're trying to set your own standards and say there are no games that aren't important. This is Liverpool. Every time you go out there with that badge on, you want to go out there and you want to win. We want to put a team out that we want to win. We're not going to compromise our ideals for this or for that. And then reality kicks in. And I think reality is kicking in right about now.
Before I bring Josh in, Mo, I've got one more thing on this. One of the things that I think, again, maybe happens as well for managers is perhaps a bit of a realisation that actually supporters might be all right with it. That I, for instance, feel as though, having gone through the pre-season and being lucky, we were lucky both to be over there, and seeing, for instance, Nioni, I am not against, if I see a team sheet tonight with Nioni on, I'm not going to go, oh my God, he's not taking this seriously. And I think the majority of Liverpool supporters, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the majority of Liverpool supporters will say, Let's see what he's about.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that can be quite a liberating moment for a manager. That's not to say I want to see him pick a team of 17-year-olds, but a 17-year-old who's been around the first team picture, if he starts tonight, I feel as though that's as much of something to get out of the experience as anything else.
Yeah, and Klopp was really clever at doing this, because it wasn't just about the fact that we're excited to see these youngsters again, give them a chance. It was a way of kind of injecting a bit of excitement into a game that most of us are kind of disrespected already. So it was a reason to go and to cheer and to support the team above and beyond the fact that this is just Liverpool playing a football match. And I think, again, he's still trying to work out how he navigates a season. And you want someone to come in and have strong ideals. That's fair enough. I think that's understandable. But I think also there's an element where we heard a lot about the fitness and the physios and his method of medical working and how great he was at keeping players fit at Feyenoord. And frankly, I believe that he probably came in here and thought, well, I can do all those methods, which means I'm not going to have 5 or 6 injuries in the middle of October. Well, guess what? We've got 5 or 6 injuries in the middle of October, and now you have to rethink it.
There is something on it, Josh, where about those sorts of younger players, but also about what the game offers Liverpool, where I feel as though he's in a position where I think he's fortunate that he can change all his back seven and still be picking internationals. He's picking a national captain now in Conor Bradley. He's picking a centre-back who I think we all agree would start for Newcastle in Joe Gomez, one who Newcastle wanted in Quansah. The fella who played in goal for the team that won the Cup in Austria, the Japanese captain. And I think if he plays Tyler Morton, and I think he should, a lad who's just got 2 seasons of Championship football under his belt and has started against Tottenham for Liverpool. So he can do all of that and change in his back seven. And I think that's an opportunity he should take, because that gives him a bedrock then to maybe look at doing other things.
Yeah, and this is where I think like squad building is probably sort of not talked about in the right ways, and I think like transfers in general are probably not talked about in the right ways to an extent, are they? But I think everyone presumes that like just building out a squad is just getting like accruing like loads and loads of good players, and I think actually what you see in the way that I think Liverpool have been quite sort of cute in their squad building, and I know that can be perceived as Liverpool penny pinching, and I understand there probably is a little bit of an element of that, but basically what Liverpool have given themselves this season is 2 good 11s, and there's arguably not much beyond that. Like if you're getting into the Tyler Mortons, then you're talking about players who ultimately lack Premier League experience if it sort of came down to the real bare bones. But what they do have is, in these early stages of League Cup rounds, in the early stages of FA Cup rounds, is like you say, you could swap out a whole back 4, you could swap out a whole back 7 if you wanted to go that far, and you'd still be confident, because Liverpool do have that really sort of strong second 11. Now that's obviously been dented by a couple of the injuries we've seen so far, and it's obviously funny off the back of the weekend where like the injury narrative was just so focused on Arsenal that it was almost forgotten that we were missing our number 1 goalkeeper and Diogo Jota, and there'd be some rotation around Jota, particularly in this fixture. You feel like with the forwards, but it just feels like Liverpool can go into this and like we've talked about Slot sort of trying to learn there. I think he's tried to strike a balance so far of being proactive and reactive, and I think that's different to Jurgen Klopp. So I think in the early stages Jurgen Klopp was just constantly trying to be proactive so that he didn't have to be reactive to anything. But I think Slot is striking quite a nice balance between the two at the moment, where sometimes in games if the pressure is sort of off Liverpool, you've seen him making more subs than probably Jurgen Klopp would have in the past. You've seen in games where he feels like they have control, not necessarily making loads of changes, but just telling the lads to sit on it a bit, keep hold of the ball and not exert as much energy. And that's where I think it has been really interesting with the manager so far, and probably where we'll see the biggest benefit, I'd like to think, and it would be hard to quantify really, but see the biggest benefit as we go deeper into the season, where you don't see quite as much fatigue in those minds and legs.
One of the things that hurts him though here is that he's in one of those situations which again is something that we've seen happen, and I think you're seeing it happen up and down the country with other sides. It appears, for instance, Arsenal come out, I think, and said Timber wasn't injured, but he was exhausted. Yeah, he comes off with exhaustion. He goes down with cramp twice.
70,
he's absolutely shot. And I think one of the things that you end up with, and this is the difficulty, we've seen it with Liverpool in the past, you've seen it with other teams, I think Manchester United and Newcastle have both suffered from it, is just a little bit of spiralling of a combination of tiredness and injuries because they end up in the same position. So we're in a situation here where the injuries, for instance, I've just said we can change the whole defence and relax, but with no Jota, no Chiesa, no Elliott, you're sort of left in what you can almost call your 8. If you remove 3 of the options for the front 8, and I know the manager doesn't like to think of it as 4-2-4, but if you sort of see it as that for a second, at least for the purposes of this,
and it was in West Ham as well.
Yeah, and Elliott, it was for West Ham, and also Elliott could play right hand side. Yeah. Chiesa is meant to be coming into play right hand side. Jota's played right hand side. Jota can play 10. Elliott can play 10. Chiesa can play 10. And all that sort of stuff. This is where the pressure does begin to build, and this is where you've got to make big calls. You've got big calls, I think, to make tonight about who starts, who's on the bench, and how he's going to use his subs all the way through the game.
And this is where it ultimately will be tough for him, because you and Mo mentioned that, and I'm probably in the same boat, that you'd quite like to see Salah not travel for this one. I honestly don't know if he has the luxury, because there's no Chiesa, there's no Jota, there's no even like a Jadon Danns as someone who bridges the gap between the academy and the first team. Suddenly you're getting towards real raw academy forwards. There's a sort of couple of names who you'd have sort of floating around the under 18s to recently in the under 21s picture, and suddenly the manager will be looking at and thinking that looks like a really weak bench, so he might not have the luxury of being able to rest a Salah, because there are a few missing. You mentioned Elliott there as well as another sort of quasi forward option who's missing, so I'll be really interested to see how the manager approached it, to be honest, because I feel like I could make a pretty strong case for him to do either. And I think it's probably going to go either way in terms of like the narrative that comes from it. Because I do remember in Klopp's first season, I think it was the Exeter game in his first season was the one where the match of the day pundits sort of were digging the boot into him early, saying, he's disrespecting the FA Cup and he's doing this. And Mo's right to mention that it always feels a little bit different with the League Cup, in that people don't perceive it as there's no magic around the League Cup. It's probably lost any semblance of that down the years now. But
it's just a good night out.
Exactly.
Which I think is more important than magic.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate it on a night out when a magician comes over to your table. So, I'm strongly against that sort of thing. No violinists, no magicians, and I don't want a rose.
Still getting Vegas flashbacks.
Yes.
I was going to say, you don't get loads of that in Gutman's bars in Liverpool, to be honest.
No. But you do get a lot of it in South Liverpool, but anyway, go on.
I've sort of lost my train of thought there, to be honest. But it just will be interesting to see what the manager does, because as I say, I feel like narratives will come out of whichever direction he takes it in that, I feel like there'll probably be more of a fan narrative if he does go strong, and that we'll all be thinking this fella doesn't know how to rest players, he doesn't know how to rotate and stuff like that. But then alternatively, if he goes really weak, I imagine the media might start to sort of latch onto that a little bit.
I think there's a little bit of a conflict. I think the other moving part, and this is what Brighton do. I'm of the view this is a bigger game for Brighton than Saturday. I spoke to Russ from Brighton Rock podcast, who was of the view that ultimately he feels it's a bigger game, but what Brighton's hierarchy think is obviously something that is a little bit different in amongst all of this. I do think it's a massive opportunity this season. You've discussed before Guardiola. We've seen Manchester City win this tournament on a few occasions. We've won it two of the last three. We won it in 22 and 24, Mo. And I think that's also another reason why, without being unbelievably complacent or arrogant, I think again, yes, it's Schlott's first go at this, but I think there is a little bit of a thing for Liverpool supporters where we are at least able to think, well, we've won it two of the last three times it's been pulled together. It will be lovely to win everything every single season. That's the aim overall, but we all acknowledge as well that isn't possible. So I think that there's a little bit of a conflict there. I think it would be easier if the previous manager was still in charge for him to be able to say, take it seriously, I've won it two of the last three times. Yeah. But I think there is a little bit of a thing here where he's got to get himself... He and they have got to sort of work out exactly what it is that the overall goal is. And then I think he's got to work out what the balance of this is. I expect Gakpo to get time on the pitch. I expect Diaz to get time on the pitch. I expect Nunez to get time on the pitch. The question is, do you want all three of them at once? Do you want to, and then sub to weaken, or do you want to do a chop and change?
So I think this might be the first time we see Szoboszlai within the forward line. I think it might be a bit smart to have him as the fourth forward option. And then if you can maybe say that Diaz starts on the bench, Gakpo and Nunez start and then Szoboszlai on the right-hand side, and then at some point Diaz comes
Who plays
in.
with behind the midfield then? If we're going to say he's going to play Morton and Endo, who's the other midfielder?
So, but that might be a mixture of Mac and Leone.
Okay.
That's kind of the way I'd be thinking about, or maybe even Curtis, depending upon how he feels about all of those three. But yeah, it's fascinating because you mentioned the fact that we've won the League Cup in the last couple of seasons, and that the fans would be thinking, "Oh, well, it's fine." I mean, I heard Mike talking on the press conference extra saying he wants another trip to Wembley. I mean, Mike, you're just greedy. But also, I think most fans, or a lot of fans, will see those League Cup runs as kind of being detrimental to the ultimate goal in the league. Because if you think about 21-22, we lose the league by a point, and there are times towards the end of that season where we're kind of going on fumes a little bit.
Yeah.
And then obviously last season, the League Cup is the last high, and then from there it all kind of slides. So you can see a world where you can say to Liverpool fans, well, look, we'll just forget about that, and that just gives us a little bit, a 10% more juice going into February, March and April. And I think that we'll all buy into that. The problem is, though, if you're the manager, if you're Arne Slot and you come out and you've set your stall out in one way, do you want to be changing your ideals this early? Do you think that he's thinking, well, if I start changing my mind about this, then they're all going to start wondering about how strong I am about all of these ideas?
A better question though, Mo, and you know, and I don't think there's a perfect answer to it. I think that, for instance, Middlesbrough supporters are loving watching Ben Doak.
Yeah.
He's having an impact for them. I spoke to Dan Gray recently, and he said he's a genuine, he gets you off the seat. The ball goes to him, and everyone's going, what's he going to do? That's brilliant, and I'm glad he's got that opportunity. I think it's good for football. He gets that opportunity. It's good for Ben Doak. Kumas scores an outrageous goal for Stoke. Absolutely outrageous goal for Stoke recently, and looks lively. Stoke supporters are really enjoying watching him as well. It's not gone quite as smoothly for Cade Gordon at Norwich so far. Again, I think that this injury issue has made it difficult. But he's got a goal. He's got 5 appearances. Clark, we chose to sell.
Yes.
Do you wonder right now if just somewhere maybe the manager's thinking, wish I kept one?
Just one more. But yes, I do think that. But I also think that if you take each case in on an individual basis, you can clearly see the justification.
Well, Gordon had to go and try and play some football regularly.
Yes. Well, I think all of them, you can make that up.
Yeah.
Well, I say Kumas is probably the only one where you can say maybe he wanted him in the building and he wanted him to kind of nurture him. But I think if you think about Kate Gordon's long injuries, I think the way that Ben Dokes, he had a flying start and then he kind of, I wouldn't call it plateaued, but he done that thing that young players sometimes do where they stop moving forward.
Yeah.
And I think that he needed a regular challenge at another high level because he was used to playing games at Celtic, and then he kind of went back into the...
and at Middlesbrough, there's the expectation to win every week.
Yeah,
most weeks.
Exactly. And the thing with the Championship as well is that things can change quickly. So you need to be able to be on your toes. You need to be able to throw... Because there's some teams who play full-on kick and rush. Some teams do the whole Russell Martin Guardiola type thing. So you need to be able to adapt to whatever it throws at you. So it's a great grounding for a young player like him. I think of Stefan Bajcetic again. I'd put him in the same category as Kai Gordon, as in he's a great player, but he needed regular football more than he needed anything else. I think the fascinating thing for me, though, is that the idea of keeping them in the building, and this was something that he alluded to in the press conference yesterday, is that the idea of keeping them in the building isn't just to have them as a backup in case something goes wrong, but it's to kind of bed them into his ideas. And that's the part where it's like, well, the people who you value, you kind of want them to have that. And then so the idea of him sending those off, like I say, they're all justifiable, but how much of it is ultimately, he doesn't really see them as being ones that he's going to rely on in 2 to 3 seasons' time. Trainioni, he did keep around. I think Trainioni showed enough in pre-season that he's like, yeah, I want to see more of this kid.
Well, that's not tonight.
And by the way, I think the other one's Jadon Danns, who's just injured at the moment. Like, I think he's the one who you probably look at if you're the manager and go, it's him and Trainioni are the two that I feel like I can't make too much of a justification for to let go. And I know there was a Plymouth move that I think falls through because of the injury, isn't there? So maybe I could have been sat eating my words in a different sort of reality.
It was noticeable, actually, when I asked him about Jadon Danns yesterday, that he had a big smile on his face, as to say, how do you know? Well, I mean, I literally saw him coming in the building when I come in there, so I was just a bit like...
This was not clever intelligence.
I almost knocked him over.
Not been lying in wait.
But no, I did specifically not ask anyone else or tell anyone else about him, just so I had it in my back pocket. But it was very much like, Okay, well, I don't want you to know, because this was the other thing. He didn't really answer my question. He just kind of went on the other bit. So we don't really know who he sees as his options here and there. I do think what you said in the press conference about him being a bit too soon for him is probably true. I think if this was the next round, I mean, God forbid Liverpool get through to the next round, but I think we might be seeing him in that. But I do agree with Josh. I think any ideas of him going out on loan second half of the season, this whole period would have probably made him think, no, I need to keep it.
Well, certainly before the end of January. I mean, it might be one where it might be a couple where you do it last week of January.
Yeah, because if we get knocked out of the FA Cup, for example.
And you work that out. You work from there, because the fourth round of the FA Cup is actually in February. Just very quick, first and foremost, any comments on all of this, Josh, that you've liked?
There's a lot of love for Mo's blossoming bromance, as someone calls it, with Arnes himself. Midnight Toker, that came from.
So I should probably point out, for all of you who don't know, I do have a YouTube channel over there. In fact, it's probably somewhere along the sidelines. So
check it out.
If you want to hear more about me and Arnie, then you can go and check me out there.
And it is very useful post-press conference. Go on, Josh.
And Barry Devaney says, has Mo decided on his lineup tonight? Congrats on the assistant manager gig, by the way. So I presume that's a big promotion for Mo there, so well done, mate. And that's it for now.
That's it for now.
A couple of people's teams, but we'll maybe do some of that in a bit.
Well, maybe, but I was just actually going to say, and this is what you normally do on these things, prediction for tonight?
I predict that it's going to go to penalties, and then I think it all depends on which Liverpool players on the pitch.
Horrible 1-0 to Liverpool, which no one particularly enjoys.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh wow, okay.
I think this team have shot themselves in the foot by just being really good at defending. That's they're just built on that defensive foundation. So every time Jarell Quansah and Joe Gomez come in, they're like, we're two of the top four in the world at this now.
That's the way it is. That's what we're going to have to come for. Okay, I like that a great deal. Listen, we are with NordVPN. If you go to nordvpn.com/TAW, you will find there, Nord being the word Nord, VPN being literally the letters VPNN, /TAW. You will find there an offer which is now better than ever. It's 4 months free, but there's additional stuff now on top as we approach Black Friday. Black Friday being one of those Americanisms that I obviously do not like, and most definitely do not approve of. As far as I'm concerned, Black Friday is and always will be the Friday immediately before Christmas, wherein lots of awful things happen and A&Es end up full. It is not an opportunity for things to be cheaper, yet NordVPN disagree with me. I've recently used NordVPN to very much enjoy the basketball. By the basketball, I obviously mean the WNBA. As far as I'm concerned, the MWNBA is nowhere near as good as the WNBA, and basically is a complete waste of time. But I loved watching the final game of the WNBA using the NordVPN to be able to do so. It allows you to watch television in other countries. It protects you in a wide variety of ways, and it means that you get to see the best iteration of the sport of basketball. Are you wasting your time this year watching the men's shit?
I mean, to be honest, considering the health of both of our teams, I think you're probably onto something. Really, yeah. I've not watched as much Sixers basketball as I would like, but then the season is long. I'm sure I'll be getting into it. To be honest, my next kind of NordVPN circle is actually probably the election in America, because I'm probably going to rage watch that.
I mean, you can do that if you want. That's not necessarily good for your mental health. You can make your own choices around that sort of thing. Do use NordVPN for these things. I say protects the passwords, does all the bits and pieces, and there are tons of offers on there at the minute. We are delighted with them for partnering with us. I was all in, as you know, by the end of the WNBA. As I say, it is the greatest iteration of the sport of basketball. I believe there's a lad knocking around who's quite good called Steve Curry. And maybe one day he'll be, anywhere near as good as Ian Escu or anywhere Stewart or any of the other characters that I very much got into. It's good that they're having a go, though, the lads, because at some point they'll manage to get the same level of entertainment.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been sort of had an interesting conversation with you around the basketball sphere in general, which obviously started with me being a big NBA fan. You then got into the college basketball, which you decided was a good form of the sport.
The March Madness, the women's one of that's also better as well.
Yeah. So but now you're just all in on basically basketball being a women's sport. And there's obviously been a bit of a thing going around on social media recently calling the NBA the MNBA, which I am into because it's annoying all the wrong people, all the right people, I should say. So yeah, I'm pleased you've managed to get that in there.
Yeah, I'm all in. So good luck. I hope everyone tries the best with the MNBA, and I hope at some point that the people who play it earn some decent money in the fullness of time. Just keep plugging away. And one day you get the same viewing figures.
We just need to make it easier for the men, Neil. Make the court smaller, make the rims lower and things like that.
We do need to make it easier for the men. I genuinely, and as I say, if you see a men's basketball player, just give him a little pat and say, keep it up one day. Anyway, we'll touch on what's happening elsewhere, Mo. I think that there's a funny thing tonight wherein I've never been more committed to an Arsenal win. They're away at Preston, and we'll see what happens there. There's other good games on paper. Tottenham versus Manchester City will be interesting to see how both approach. It's Villa are still in this, which came as a bit of a shock to me when I checked. Palace, who look slightly resurgent all of a sudden, they've got themselves a decent fixture. Brentford got through last night. I think genuinely, I'm not being sort of glib for once. I'm of the view, I think this will be a nice tournament this season to see one of the non-established Big Six go on and win it.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's definitely going to be a mid-table-ish team in the final. So whether it is a Brentford, whether it is a Palace,
Manchester United,
of course, one of those teams who are just not going to get anywhere near Europe. Then I think that's probably
other than through this competition.
Yeah, exactly. I think for the rest of us, there is going to come a point where it's just going to be, is it still worth it? And I do think draws might come into it as well. So
of course.
If whoever wins out, Spurs and City end up drawing Arsenal in the next round, then we can all sit back with a big bag of popcorn and watch how all that go together. But that's absolutely going to determine how they approach these ties. But I think that there's actually quite, the way the rounds have gone this year, this particular round, there's quite a few interesting games to come in. So like, if we weren't playing tonight, I'll definitely be watching Palace against Villa, just because I do think that Palace are in one of those strange situations where they've got a big squad and they don't really know who fits the first team. So there's going to be lots of players who are playing tonight who are like, well, I can force my way into the first team, and that's when these games are at their most interesting for me.
Yeah, there's around the whole thing. There's Newcastle Chelsea. I think is a really interesting game. Newcastle, I think, should be all in for this tournament to such an extent. But Chelsea, it's worth saying, the European tournament for them is the Conference League. They can basically play the Conference League team, Chelsea, because they've been doing the real drop off. But it's still a decent side. The Conference League team. And also, there's a bit of a conversation about what would you rather win, from a Chelsea perspective as well, between this and the Conference League. And they can expect to qualify. My point here is that I think Newcastle-Chelsea could end up being possibly the most obviously, normally, in inverted commas, competitive of these fixtures tonight.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how Newcastle approach it, really, because I think they are one of those teams who, like, they've been trying to be a little bit cuter, probably because of financial fair play, to be honest, but been trying to be a little bit cuter in their squad building, and it's not quite led to a lot of depth yet. I don't feel like, at least not to the sort of, not to the extent of Chelsea, but I mean, fucking hell, who's doing it to the extent of Chelsea? It feels like they could honestly field 4 different sides in 4 different competitions, and every one of those sides would have Premier League experience in. So I'll be interested to see like a couple of the results that sort of come out of this one, and just like the way teams approach it generally, because it is funny, really. Like I think Mo mentioned it before, like Pep Guardiola's been in situ for a little while now, and I think City have, like, at least like there's always a perception of depth around City, even if it's not quite true, even if they've got like lads like James McAtee and Liam Delap and stuff on the bench from sort of yesteryear.
Well, McAtee will probably start tonight, and Scott Carson will be on the bench tonight. They've only been, City haven't been filling the bench.
Well, this is what I mean. Is like there's always a perception of depth around City, but in recent years it has been lads like Liam Delap, James McAtee and stuff like that getting onto Premier League benches. Never mind in sort of League Cup, and obviously that's where lads like Cole Palmer, for example, have been able to get opportunities in the past. But there's always that perception of depth around City, which I don't think truly exists. So like Guardiola is sort of afforded that, because like I always find, because City are dead strong, and then no one actually looks when they field.
No one ever reads the team.
Yeah, 3 18-year-olds. Whereas for someone like Slot, I don't think he quite sort of has that grace yet. So I'm interested to see the way that other managers approach it, because Maresca, again, I don't think he has to worry, but there is probably a thing there where if he makes too many changes and they go out to a changed Newcastle side, the people start to sort of look at him then. So they're all the ones I'm particularly interested in, particularly because we've now had that first managerial sacking. You're sort of almost looking for the clues in who may well end up being next. Not that I'm alluding it might be Maresca, by the way, because I think Chelsea are great.
I think it's fascinating for Newcastle for a number of reasons. There's been a few rumblings of discontent over recent weeks now, and it's like, a lot of people were saying, well, they're going to be in prime position to push ahead because they're not going in Europe.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really materialised. They've had some good results. They haven't had some good performances. So if they then lose again, and this is another one of those things where they still need a trophy. Like, they still crave that under the surface more than anything else. So losing one of, frankly, their 2 opportunities to win a trophy.
You ruling them out of the league.
Sorry. For absolute clarity, I do not think Newcastle will win the Premier League. It's to take them out, and obviously it is their biggest chance. I do think that any of those rumblings will start to get louder, and like Josh was saying, that once one managerial dominoes fall, there is just this kind of like latent pressure that kind of shifts around, looking for someone to latch onto.
It's a big international break coming up.
Exactly. And I think that Newcastle probably aren't going to make as many changes. For Chelsea, I think Maresca could go in there thinking, we could win this and the Conference League and qualify for the Champions League, and it'll be like a fantastic season for us. But I do also think if they go out in this round, particularly because like we have to remember as well, these 2 teams played in this competition last season, and Newcastle should have won and got beat on penalties. So if something,
Chelsea pull it back late, don't they? Really late. So
if something similar happens in this one again, I think if Chelsea go out in a similar situation, they'll be like, that's okay. We can still meet our main objectives for the season. I think the B team players will probably be more upset than the Maresca would be.
Okay, I want to sort of begin to round this off. I want to talk a little bit about United, Mo. At around 12 o'clock, I've got to go and get hit in the face with a custard pie for Zoe's place. So,
which is much more entertaining.
I was conscious of time. I mean, they could have done it here, sort of marched into the room. But I should have thought that.
It'd be a great way to end talking Red Sox.
Do you want to go and have a chat so we can put it together? There is with them. I feel as though it's a really fascinating, what looks like will be the appointment of Amorim. You know, having done a lot of looking into him, a couple of interviews, stuff like that, when it looked like he was favourite for the Liverpool job earlier in the season. I can very much see why Liverpool didn't go with him, and that's not just in hindsight because of Schlott. It's because Liverpool's squad was being built in a very clear direction, and the idea of the way Amorim plays is so specific. And this is my point, when I look at it, I feel as though it suits the spine of the United side, the attacking midfielders of the United side pretty much. They've got the forward options, I think, can suit it. I think they could possibly do with one more really good midfielder to make it work, because he only plays 2 in the middle, and one of those will presumably be Ugarte more often than not. But I think it helps the centre-halves. I think it'll suit the goalkeeper. A lot of good passing from long. He's good at that. I just don't know quite what they do in the wide areas.
I think it's going to be fascinating, because you're right, there are lots of people in that squad who will suit it, and on the flip side there's maybe 4 or 5 who will hate this, who will absolutely hate this, and he's going to have to knock on some doors and be like, listen mate, I know that you want to play up front, but how do you feel about wing back? And the answer is going to be, not great boss, not great. And I think how he...
But he's got full-backs that don't suit wing-back. Apart from Luke Shaw, he's got full-backs that don't suit wing-back.
Exactly. I mean, even if Tyrell Malacia ends up getting fit, I wouldn't really fancy him out there. I think that how he navigates this first bit of kind of teething problems, because this was the thing about him, is that he is very wedded to what it is that he does. And whether or not he, like Ten Hag, will come into England and suddenly realise, actually, it doesn't work as well as it did over there, and I have to start changing things. I have to start compromising here, there and everywhere. And frankly, that was the beginning of the end for Ten Hag, because he suddenly found himself in a bit of a mess that didn't really suit anybody. But I think Amorim he will get a lot more grace than Ten Hag did, because he comes from a higher base. I think he's got a better reputation. However, there is one thing that I would want to put into all of this, is the fact that we mentioned that he was fit for the Liverpool job. Liverpool didn't end up getting him. Chelsea were looking for a new manager, didn't end up getting him. West Ham were looking for a new manager, didn't end up getting him. Manchester United were looking for a new manager in the summer, and I guarantee you there'd have been a conversation in that room about, well, what about Ruben Amorim? And there was a reason they said no. What is that reason, and why have they now decided to?
No, I think it is that it is so distinctive. I think it is, but I think United have sort of backed themselves into the corner. Amorim started the season really well, done really well in Europe. It's worth pointing that out as well as 9 out of 9 domestically. So I think that this becomes part of both the problem. It is that you are effectively gambling, remoulded a squad for a period of time, but I think that the other issue that was they've ended up now, they've got 6 out of contract next summer, 2 the summer after. You're not that far away from it just sort of remoulding itself. And I think that this is the fundamental problem that Amorim is going to run into with the way in which he plays. Let's just allow for the fact that the worst case scenario from the minute he steps through the door at Sporting has been that he's got the 3rd best group of players. The truth of this right now, Josh said before how much he likes Chelsea. Like, I think it takes 4 transfer windows, I'd argue, if United getting everything right to have a group of players as good as Chelsea's right now.
Well, we were talking about it on the weekend the other day about how many of their players were getting to play for Newcastle, and it wasn't very many. So you're not only doing that, but then it becomes about, well, they've spent all much this time and this money and this kind of mind space on this new leadership group of Omar Barada, of Jason Wilcox, of Dave Brailsford. These are the heads. These are the adults in the building. These are the guys who are going to set the template for where Manchester United goes. Dan Ashworth. These are going to be the ones making all the key decisions. And then what happens? You bring in a manager who says, I need all different players to play the way I want to play. So suddenly, that manager's desires are now leading the way when it comes to recruitment, because you're having to buy players who suit that. So suddenly, these guys aren't in control of recruitment anymore. And if this goes wrong, then 18 months down the line, you're going to be back to square one.
Square one is my favourite place for Manchester United. Square one is just where I like to see them at all opportunities. I like the desire to turn everything into a dreadful snakes and ladders board, where there are so many snakes and so few ladders. Josh, have you got any more questions, comments?
No, not really. Just a few people sort of reacting to being sad, basically, about Ten Hag finally getting the boot.
Just remember what we had. Don't dwell on what we lost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Smile because it happened. Smile because of the 7-0.
Yeah, don't frown because it's over.
Exactly. No, and then that's about everything.
That's about everything. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to NordVPN. Check out nordvpn.com/TAW to see a whole wide range of offers. Thank you very much to Mo. Thank you very much to Josh. This has been a wonderful, much fun talking Reds. Look forward to tonight's game. We'll have everything you need after the match. We all know Saturday's the biggest game, but tonight will be a really interesting one. So do sign up and subscribe if you want more of this sort of thing leading into the weekend before what is a massive week for Liverpool, and then what we hope is a massive November and December as well. Jordan Singleton's looked after both sound and images. You know how hard it is to do both? Honestly, what a fucking man. That's been Talking Red. See you later.
Bring your digital life to a whole new level with NordVPN. Choose the fastest VPN on the planet and explore the internet without interruption.